Greetings, everyone. I'm Lynne Gilliland, and we are here with Lessons from Leaders, and we have the great honor to be here with Pape Gaye, who is the CEO and president of IntraHealth. And we are catching him at an excellent time for two reasons. One, he is in Senegal at this moment, which is fabulous that he is he's in his home country.
That is right.
And where his heart is, I assume. And also, he is moving on from IntraHealth. He's moving into becoming, is it President Emeritus?
President Emeritus, that's correct.
So we're catching him at a point in his own transition after a fabulously long, fruitful career. And Pape and I had an excellent pre-conversation where we were talking about leadership, and I just actually had to tell him right before we started recording, we got to record because we want to capture this. So I'm really excited for everybody that you're going to get to hear, listen in on our conversation about leadership. And so Pape, welcome to you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn.
And just to start with, how about just catch a little brief about how you got here, like your story about how you actually ended up being at IntraHealth, which is quite an interesting trajectory as a young man and ending up in the U.S.
Yeah. So I like to talk about what inspired me actually to take on this line of work. And I like to share the story that it is really my early contact with Peace Corps volunteers. Because when I was finishing up high school, I had a chance to meet a gentleman who ended up being really a mentor of mine and who helped guide me through what is now my professional life, really. And the conversation in those early days were around the Peace Corps and the idea of why were these young Americans leaving their comfortable life in the U.S. to come and have what I perceived at the time as, very difficult and challenging life. And I had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what the Peace Corps was. And this gentleman, his name was Gary Engelberg, in fact, created an opportunity for me and a few friends to spend time with volunteers in their villages. So it was very revealing because even though I'm African, I'm a Senegalese, I was a city boy. I grew up in Dakar. I had not until then an opportunity to spend a lot of time in the village. And so I got to learn about the life of a Peace Corps volunteer, and I must say I was greatly inspired, and I think that's really what put me in the trajectory that I then took, because I ended up coming to the U.S. Thanks to my wife, who was American and who was also a former Peace Corps volunteer that I got to meet. And when we returned to the U.S., I decided to study business, and I decided afterwards that I'm not done with doing more of this development of understanding what Peace Corps was about. So I chose to stay in development, and so I continued doing some work for the Peace Corps until then an opportunity came to work with an NGO. I did not even know what an NGO was, but I did have this opportunity, and that led to IntraHealth, which was a program of the University of North Carolina, which at the time was looking for somebody to start their operation in West Africa. So, I have spent all of my career with this organization, except for the time I spent doing work for the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. Most of my career was spent working for the Peace Corps, or working for IntraHealth.
Yes.
And And I was the regional director for Western Central Africa, and then an opportunity came up to come back to headquarters, which I really resisted because I liked staying in the field, but I ended up coming to the US and ended up being the CEO of the organization a year after I got here. And it's been quite a journey, but it was just perfect because I had studied management at the University of California in Los Angeles at UCLA, and I thought there was need for good management in the development world. And so I was very happy to have an opportunity to take the job, come back to Africa, work for a number of years, and get back. And I felt I was in a very good position, having worked at the field level, having worked at the regional level, and now having a chance to lead the organization at a global level. And that journey has been going on over 30 years now. So that was my brief story for how I got to IntraHealth.
Mm-hmm. So we had talked about you being the Peace Corps, but hadn't gone into that much detail before, and I didn't realize how seeing what Peace Corps volunteers changed how you thought about what you. So that is very. That's I know because I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I know how it impacted me.
You were.
But I was a Peace Corps volunteer.
That is right. That is right. I think we said that. We talked a little bit about that.
That's that other side of it. I never heard that story from anyone before. You're probably not the only one. I just hadn't heard it before. Yeah.
It is so interesting because I like to say that because, well, I know because I did so much work as a Peace Corps trainer, and I know that was one of the goals of Peace Corps when President Kennedy said that was really to allow Americans to learn about other cultures, and then vice versa, allow other cultures to learn about America. And I think I'm the proof that I'm a true representative of that reality. It happened to me, and that inspired me, and that's why I like to tell the story.
And where I wanted to jump to is the thing that you and I keep talking about on the 2 times that we've talked is about leadership and how what is needed for leaders today, and how it's such a complex environment now that leaders are working in. And so just what are some of the questions that you're asking yourself?
So it's very interesting because this is a subject I'm very passionate about, and I think maybe because I've been so long in the development field, and I have seen some progress, but when I look at what remains to be done, I say we have only scratched the surface. And I say, at the same time, I also see the progress the world is making in terms of technology, especially in terms of communication. You know, the saying that the world is small, it's a small world, is a reality. It's just, when I see all the changes that have happened since I have been in this field, I find myself asking, how is it that I could do more or better? And what is it that I needed to have more of in order to do more? Because it seems to me that our world today certainly has the resources or has the resources that it will take. For example, to allow so many people to have access to health care. And I feel in a lot of ways that we are at a stuck point. I'm an optimistic person, believe me. I see a glass half full. But I do get frustrated and I do get impatient when I see how little we're advancing. And I keep asking myself, how can leadership change that? Something tells me that it is all about leadership, especially dealing with the continent of Africa, which has so much potential, but continue to have so many problems. And one of the things we talk about a lot is the bad governance and the corruption and the poor quality of leadership, all of these things. And I want to make a difference. And I feel like I've been blessed. I've been blessed with opportunities to learn. I've been blessed with opportunity to be educated in excellent schools in the United States. And I want to make a difference. And I feel sometimes that my ability to make that difference is hampered somehow. So I wonder, how can I be a better leader? And I wonder, what can I do to foster more progress, to help bridge the gap? And so I reflect back and I look at my leadership journey, and I look at what I was able to realize, and I said, you know, it's not bad. I think there's a lot you can be proud of. But when I look at how the landscape has changed in the last few years, and when I look at how complex things have gotten, I go back to this to this thing that somehow I don't believe that what led us to the successes that we had in the past is not necessarily what's gonna make us successful for things that we need to do in the future. So that's where I am. I'm in this phase. I reflect a lot about this because my career has been all around training and building capacity. That's what I did for the Peace Corps. I was a Peace Corps trainer. I was a language trainer. Then I was a cross-cultural trainer. And I think my passion actually for this subject came out of that piece. I was always intrigued, Lynn, and always interested in this idea about, at the time I must say it was about management. I was really interested in this idea that how do management principles as we know them in the US or in the West, how do they apply in other cultural contexts? Again, this was inspired by my work with the Peace Corps, by cross-cultural training and all of this thing. In fact, I should tell you a little story about when I was going to school at UCLA, when I was enrolled in the School of Management. But my mentor was a woman by the name of Kel Salzman, who used to teach in the School of Education, and who was very interested in this idea about cultural competencies and working with training in cross-cultural, because she was just a very early believer that that companies will learn so much will do so much better if they understood the culture in which they are operating. You remember those days in the 80s.
Yes.
In fact, I also had a teacher at the school, at the UCLA school, Bill Uchi, had written a book. I think it was the Theory Z, and he was very interested in why Japanese companies were so successful. And he had this theory that they were able to kind of mix Japanese cultures with Western values. So I was always interested in this idea of cultural competency, and that's a journey I'm still on. Is looking at how we gonna practice a new set of principles that would make us more successful in leadership. So I find it fascinating. I find it very interesting, and I find it very relevant because from my standpoint, we can no longer accept the idea that we're all going to serve only one country. We have to serve the planet. We have to serve humanity. And I truly believe that leadership has a lot to do with that. I think it has to do with now I'm somewhat a little bit influenced by some of the literature that I was just browsing through on this book that you shared with me. But yeah, I think there's this dimension of leadership, certainly in our nonprofit world, that I think is an integral part of, well, making this world a better place. I know it's a saying, but I think that's what it is. I think that's the principle that guides all of us in the nonprofit sector. That if we are to be successful, then we need to embrace this way of looking at how we lead and who we lead, because then you soon realize, oh my God, it is complex. It is not the simple, easy world that I think we were in, let's say 30 short years ago, where all we wanted to do was solve a few problems. Make sure children are vaccinated. Make sure women go to the health center to deliver. But that's no longer enough. I think you soon realize, oh my God, it's not enough to just give people health care. You have to take care of their education need, and you have to take care of their food security, because if they don't eat well, certainly they're not going to worry about their health. So there is a complexity that I think we are faced with today. And for me, the biggest, most interesting part of the journey is when we factor in this idea of sustainable. It's sustainable development. Because it's very clear to me that the day of what I like to call the missionary model of development, where basically there are people who are endowed, who are resourced, and who want to help, who then help people who need them. I think we've passed that, and I think we've outgrown that mode of development. So, and I think the big question is that how do we really get to sustainable development, and how do we lead in a way that's going to lead to sustained development? These are the things that make it, to me, very exciting, and these are the things that excite me every day. I wake up and I think about how do we do that? How do we accelerate progress? So when I speak about my favorite subject, which is human resources development and the health workforce crisis and all of that, this is where I like to go, because I like to say it's not just that we are short few million health workers. It's like we are not able to get the best out of the few health workers that we have. So these are the kind of things that I think are, for me, it makes leadership, the leadership journey, whether it's you're training it or whether you're trying to improve your own leadership, or you're looking at how to create the atmosphere for better leadership to be exercised in the country that we have. These are the things that I grapple with, and it's not just a course that you can teach. It's how do we do that? So this idea that we are in a world that is very, very different today because it's complex, it's volatile, it's unpredictable. This VUCA idea makes a lot of sense to me, and it makes me say very loud, we need a new kind of leadership, and we need to do something about leadership. We need to supplement whatever leadership we can learn in school or in the classroom with something else.
It seems when I listen to, it feels like there's two parts, but they go together. One is a new leadership.
Yeah.
In fact, I wrote down that last time we talked, you said there is a call for a new way of leading.
Yeah.
So, and because I'm trying to paraphrase you, the complexity of the situation, the style of leadership isn't enough. It's not going to work.
That's right.
And then it matches with the way we've been delivering programs or delivering services or trying to help others develop is not also, that model is no longer, we have to
Correct.
redo it. So these two go together, a new leadership for this new way of, I'm saying delivering services, but that's not what I mean, doing programming.
Yeah.
Right? So
that's correct.
And they're connected, right? They go,
They are.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I believe they are, because it's, I think the bottom line is, my interpretation of it is that I think we need to go through this journey of going beyond focusing on ourselves alone, which I think, as I reflect back about my journey, it was all about me and how do I be a better leader, very much linked to what my funder wanted me to do, what my client wanted me to do.
Right.
How can I be successful in doing that? If I delivered according to what USAID wanted me to do, then I was successful. If I delivered according to what the project's goal was, then I was successful. I'm finding out that's no longer enough.
I love that.
I'm finding out that you can do that, but then you're left with so what?
Yeah. That's not the goal. That's not the goal. That's just the funding mechanism.
That's right. That's right. So I'm saying, okay, well, I think it is about, if you're going to make that transformation from this missionary model of doing development to something that is going to be a little bit more sustainable, it is about empowering people to do it themselves, right? And
We have to
so,
think of a new way to say empowering people, though, because that's like so top down, and
I so much agree.
I don't know what the right way is to say it, but we're not empowering them.
I am so much with you on
removing
that one.
helping remove obstacles, or I don't know what it is. Okay, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's about how do we get them to, how do we help harness the potential, or how do we, it's about that. You know, some of the terms that I'm trying to ban from my vocabulary. That's one of them. The other one is actually this capacity building.
Oh, that's good.
It is so top down.
Yes, I am now going to build your capacity.
Exactly.
Even though you have been surviving in this situation.
Oh my God, it is so bad. It is so condescending. It is so, you know, I struggle with those, and I couldn't agree with you more. It is about you know, being a catalyst or whatever that is that you're doing.
I wonder, Pop, though, if what is the word? If it's not empowering, if it's identifying what is exactly trying to happen here,
yeah,
that will help figure out what is the new model.
Yeah.
And then what is so I'm making this up, what is the leadership then that brings out that, or not brings it out, we're not bringing it out,
we are
clearing the space, or
yeah, it is, you know, if you stay, it is about facilitating something, but it is about creating the conditions for people.
I like that word.
Yeah, it is really what it is. It is about, it is about creating an enabling environment, because you want people to actually do that. You want people to really exercise, what is it, agency?
Right.
So it is about creating the conditions, and it is about facilitating. But yeah, it is definitely not this empowering or this capacity building or this, because that's the one way. I mean, I think people in our field, development actors are on the right track by creating this whole new way of these challenges that are being created. I look at here in Africa how much the social entrepreneurs are just having a field day, because you know you launch these initiatives, you provide people with a problem statement, and then you ask them to come up. When I was in Benin last week, I visited this school. This guy created this center called IntraHealth. What he does, basically, he trains these young entrepreneurs, women mostly, and his setup, which is what I'm trying to replicate, going to be replicating here in Senegal, is to just create the space for kids to come and learn. And because, you know, we need to get them involved. We need to maybe give them the problem statement and let them come up with a way to solve it. It's one of our problems with leadership today. We do too much design. We
Right.
go too far into the problem solving. You know, it's all set up. The framework for the solution is all designed. So if we make mistake, we make mistake. I was reading this very interesting article that a friend of mine shared last night on how much money the foundation, like such as the Gates Foundation, is spending on the McKinsey of the world, McKinsey, Boston Consulting. It's like millions and millions of dollars. And in fact, this particular article was talking about their impact with institutions like the WHO. And even though WHO is not very transparent about how much money we are talking about, it's anticipated that it's millions and millions of dollars. So we are now taking kind of the business model and trying to apply that into the development sphere. And that article had a little piece when it was talking about what if we were wrong? And it gave the example of Unitate. Are you familiar with Unitate?
No.
Which was actually an initiative. I think the French government started that, or it was this initiative to work with the airline company so that you collect $1 on every ticket as a fund. It still exists, but at one time they brought in McKinsey or one of these big consulting firms to design it. And they made a major mistake because they anticipated that this initiative could raise about $1 billion a year. They're not raising, not even a percent. I think it's about 1% of that figure is what they're raising. So they're talking about, you know, it doesn't always work, the kind of a business model. So all of this, I think we were talking about this whole idea of the attitude change we need to make in ourselves in order to do business, to lead differently, because it's tricky. You know, this is why I think it's so complex. And to me, that's where the opportunity is, because I think if we adopt a much more humble attitude to it, and if we accept the shortcomings that we might have ourselves, and we avail ourselves for also learning, I think we can be better leaders for the future. Certainly when it comes to development.
So accept our shortcomings, avail of ourselves of learning. You said one other thing. It's also realizing that we're in, you know, we're in a box. You're in a box. You don't want to say empowerment, but we're not sure what the other word is, just to mention one box. And and then we have our limitations as human beings. We all are making up stories that we have to operate this in success. You know, we don't want to make mistakes, and so we only work in this area because we know we'll be successful. And so I think what you're talking about is we also getting out of that. Like we have to be willing to what they call in the Scaling Leadership book, which Pop and I are in love with at this moment, is you have to be able to play it not safe.
Yes, very true.
What excites me about what you're talking about is what else is out there. Like, what are we making up that where we may be wrong? What else is out there? And you know, you're particularly interested in Africa. What are the models? What are the leadership things that are working that are fresh to those of us working in, you know, not in Africa, I think are the right way to do it? What's other?
I think it's to me, I think there might be some loss of opportunities to listen to the right people, or, you know, who are those? Maybe it's those grassroots leaders who are so apt at understanding what their communities want. It's so they're called in this part of the world the opinion leaders. You go to the village level or the community levels, and these are people that somehow the communities listen to. I think there is more to do in this space, and so in my journey, I said, how can we complement what big data or business or what they're teaching us, how can we complement and reinforce that by listening to voices that we don't listen to, we don't hear from. And I think that's what it is. I think that, to me, I know that there's this disconnect between the conversation in Geneva or New York or Washington and, what happens in the small village outside of Dakar, and creating those opportunities. We started doing some work at IntraHealth, highlighting and amplifying the voice of frontline health workers. In fact, in collaboration with some big companies, the Medtronic Foundations, or Johnson & Johnson, sponsoring some of our work to just do that, to create opportunities for these frontline health workers to come to this big gathering, whether it's at the World Health Assembly and stuff, and just talk about what they're going through and what they're doing. And I think it's tremendously useful just to hear that perspective. It teaches you both how simple it could be,
right?
Yet, how complex it is, because, there are all these factors, how do you have multi-sectoral approach to development and so forth. So I think there's that. There's definitely closing the gap by having more voices, more diverse voices. I like to say every time I'm in these big meetings where everybody's nodding at what you say, everybody's agreeing, is that, how do we bring those people who are not convinced yet, right? You and I are kind of the exception. The problem really for getting the average American to understand the importance of the US continuing to invest in development.
Right.
It's you and I are convinced. I mean, we do this has been our life. But how do you get those people who don't understand the value, who don't see the value? How do you get them? Because they are not at the table that we're in when we go to these big global health meetings and these big conferences and so forth. So I think that's a lot. A lot of it is that, and I think a lot of it is just turning the table, really, getting those voices, creating a situation where people. How do we level the playing field? And I think that's actually the biggest challenge.
What is the playing field? Which is
the development? So the development playing field, the way I see it is that you've got the people with the resources trying to help the people that need those resources.
Right.
Of course, the people that need the resources are very clever. They watch you, they listen to you, and they
They've
try
had
to see
50 years of 60 years of figuring out how
of
to make it
figuring out
work.
exactly, exactly. And then yes, and then they play your game.
So it's not, it's a different playing field. It's
Maybe,
how do we invite people to a
maybe
different, I don't know if it's the word game, but this is a different.
that's a better that is actually a better rendition of what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say.
I hear what you're
Absolutely,
saying. It's a different,
it
because
is.
what you're talking, if I'm getting it, what you're talking about is it's a whole new
It is.
scenario. It's a whole different game.
It is.
We meet as partners and
Yeah.
equals, and I sit at your feet and you sit at my feet, depending on what's happening. And
Yeah. Yeah.
in
But
some ways, we have to, it's unlearning. It's our favorite word now, you're going to have to disrupt the system. You're going to have
yes.
to,
Yes.
which
But we
that's
have to
just,
disrupt ourselves too,
we
in a
have to
way.
start with ourselves. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. But you're so right. I love that term, unlearning. You know, I see myself. I say I have to be very careful. I say, yeah. When I come in and I speak to people, and then they say, "Oh well, you're just an American. You know, you've spent all these years over there. You know, you speak their language, and you know that's not the way we think here. And yeah, there's a part of what I've learned that I have to unlearn very quickly if I want to be impactful and successful in this environment. Definitely.
So if we just hypothetically, although it would be super fun, check back with you in, let's say, 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been very, very successful
Mm-hmm.
in whatever is your dream. What would
Mm-hmm.
describe to us what you will tell us that you know now, or you discovered, or you're doing?
So I would point to a development model. You know, I think I'm a realistic person too, because I think when there are resources, first of all, I think it's in the interest of the world to continue to support development work. I don't think the final answer is just to turn everything into a market-driven solutions. Although I like to go there, and I think there's a place for market-driven solution to what we do. Create the opportunity for people to actually do it their way. And I don't think making money is bad, not at all. I think, in fact, it's in the DNA of a lot of people. When I look at, you know, the women, the market women in West Africa, who are really the engine of economic growth in this region, they've been doing this for decades. They've been doing this forever. They know what to do. They know how to sell. They know. So it is a question of creating the conditions. You notice that I'm trying to avoid empowering.
It's tough.
It is very tough. It is creating these conditions for them to actually do what they know how to do best. So I would see, to come back to your question, I would see a situation where, you know, the US government wants to support continued economic development and better health, but they will make those resources available, but they would be a lot less controlling about how to design the programs. That they would be calling on some of the people that I had an opportunity to work with, to advise them on how to spend those resources. If I saw that situation, I would be a happy camper. If I saw a shift in the way of the institute that I'm creating, that I'm trying to set up, or work that will grow out of that, will be trusted by, whether it's private sector companies or its development organization, to really get to, would be providing this kind of a advisory services, or would be brokering kind of a new way of approaching and measuring the successes of development activities. So those are the kind of things I would be looking for. I would be looking, what is the shift that I'm looking for, a shift in the model. As painful as it might be today, be thinking about that, because I think about organizations like my own organization, and I'm saying, this is going to change. I don't know which way, but it needs to change. I think we need to declare success at a certain level and move on to the next thing. I want to see what that next thing is. And I'm looking at the number of people and the number of institutions that we would see taking on some of the, lessening the burden a little bit on, and so you'd see a lot fewer big Geneva-based meetings, to design global project, and then you would see much more homegrown type of activities, design. The type of grassroots activities that, I don't know which field you were in the Peace Corps.
Agriculture.
You were agriculture. You were trying to spear some local
cacao. I worked on cocoa.
Cacao. You worked on cocoa. So you did a lot of these kind of entrepreneur type and how to organize people, and I would see a lot more at a much larger scale of these things.
That's lovely. Yeah. So, to our viewers and listeners, we will see if Pape will be generous for us to check back with him over time, so we can keep
absolutely
up with this beautiful story.
Absolutely, I would love to, because I think it's a fascinating journey.
Yeah,
I think I don't think it's a journey that ever ends. I think it's a journey that's always going to have so many. And the fascinating thing is that if you know where it's going to end, that's probably. I just think it's way too complex. Individuals are too complex, and I think this idea that, especially for Africa, I think it's true for other regions too. I think the work that we have left to do, unfortunately, it's this complex situation created by climate change, unfortunately, and other problems in the world. But it has to do with people who are displaced, internally displaced people. I think people who are migrating, I see a country like Senegal here, where the dream of every kid is to get in a boat and go to Europe, because what do I have to lose is what they're going to tell you. They're going to try and do that. But so I think, unfortunately, our work in development is going to continue to be more complex because of this situation, more refugees, more displaced people, and then how do we reach them? And I think it's going to require solutions that we don't know yet. So I think this journey is one that's going to take a long time. That's going to have a lot more twists and turns, and but I think it's fascinating because I think human beings are fascinating. And if you agree, like that book, Scaling Leadership, saying there is I think they use this terminology. I think crucible. That's a journey is really this crucible of it's a place where you're given an opportunity to really look at yourself and look at the world you're operating in, and I think it's a fascinating world. So look forward to that conversation. You know?
Yes, and you have been so generous with your time and your thoughts, and on my own self, I could spend several hours batting around ideas with you. So on behalf of everyone who's going to have an opportunity to hear this, thank you so very much.
Thank you
I really
so
appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for the gift of that book that you just gave me. I'm so much looking forward to it.